And then I stayed over East and worked at the church. I did my prac at. And then figured my family have suffered long enough without me being there to be their favourite. And so I came home at the beginning of this year. And then a friend of mine, he passed away in a motorbike accident, so I went back over for the funeral with the plan to stay over there for 3 weeks. Ended up being 2 months because I got stranded. But then Western Australia was like, fine, we'll let you back in. And here I am. I left for Avondale in 2012. Again, graduated in 2018. And yes, your maths is correct. It was 7 years for a 4-year degree. Did a couple of subjects again because I really liked them, not because the lecturer thought I needed them. Greek. But in my time at Avondale, I learned one major thing, and that is I went to a lot of weddings because I was a theology student, so I made friends with a lot of theology students, and those that came in single, most of them came out married, and you'd make friends with them, and so you have to go to their wedding, and being a guest is so hard. But because the way it would work is a first-year theology student, if they came in single, and they did end up getting married afterwards, they followed like a very predictive pattern, which was that they would meet their future wife, because it was normally the men. Female theology students, if you went in single, you're probably going to come out single. I did, so I stayed extra long just to make sure I would. But they would meet their future girlfriend, and they would go through like this period that I like to call pre-dating. Pre-dating is where you're not sure if they are dating, but they look like they could be dating, and like nobody's allowed to also pre-date, you're exclusive. You're pretty much dating, but nobody wants to put a label on it. And then second year comes along and they're definitely dating, and then third year comes along and they quickly put a ring on it because interviews are coming up, and they think that you are, they do love them. I don't want to diminish that. They do love them, but it also makes you a little bit more hireable if you are you are going to get married. And then by fourth year, they get married, and the biggest, most busiest wedding season at Avondale is the period between your final exam and graduation. That's when they'll get hitched. And so I get invited to weddings. I don't necessarily attend them because they're all over East, and it's just, I love them, but I don't love them $800 for a flight to and from to go to their wedding, if you know what I mean. So gone to quite a few weddings, and they all have that Bible verse. You know the one I'm talking about, 1 Corinthians 13, verse 4, which I bookmarked in my Bible, which says, love is patient, love is kind, it does not envy, it does not boast, it is not proud, it is not rude, it is not self-seeking, it is not easily angered, and it keeps no record of wrongdoings. So I heard it a lot, and I'm sure that we've all heard it a lot. It's that Bible verse that you're all just like, as soon as somebody says it, you're saying it with them in their mind. And if you had to do like a Pathfinder Memory Gems test, you would get it correct every time. In Greek, when we did our Greek exam, we would have to translate Greek into English. And there was one Bible verse, John 1:1, which says, in the beginning there was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, and the Word. And the word for word in Greek is logos. So we didn't have to learn the whole translation. We just needed to find the words, the key words, and we're like, that's what verse it is, and we write it out. And this was one of those verses. It's up there with John 3:16. And for me, it's like, when I was growing up, it was the purpose of saying, I know all these Bible texts, but there is a difference between knowing and doing. And what we're going to look at today is we're actually going to look at verse 5 and 6. No, 6 and 7, I can't count. I had this problem this morning. But before I do that, I just want to say a word of prayer. So if you could all bow your heads with me, that would be great. Hey, God, thank you so much for the lessons you've taught us in your life and in our lives. And Lord, as I give this message, may we hold on to the spirit of it, and may it touch our hearts, and may we walk away with a sense of action towards it. In your name I pray, amen. Now, I have a bit of a confession to make, and I'm not proud of it, and it's a bit of an addiction, and I will get help, I promise. But I'm addicted to reality TV. It's just a huge, huge issue I face. Bachelor, Bachelor in Paradise, Bachelorette, everyone's looking at me with judgmental looks. I'm a celebrity, get me out of here. The Block, oh, that's coming back tomorrow night, I'm so excited. Married at First Sight, that was a real low point for me. That was when I realized I've hit rock bottom. I do need help. My Kitchen Rules, all those sorts of shows, I have a bit of an addiction to. It has gotten better, and please don't judge my character based on that. It started with The Biggest Loser. I blame that reality TV show because I liked to sit there. Again, don't judge my character for what I'm about to say. I liked to sit there and eat junk food and laugh at them and be like, haha, look what I can eat and you can't, ha ha ha. And now I'm like a diabetic, so I guess you got the last laugh. Whoops. But one reality TV show, we actually watched a lot of reality TV shows at Avondale, and every floor has a lounge room. And especially like when it was Bachelor season, that would be filled with girls watching The Bachelor, and they'd put on the Facebook page, we're all watching The Bachelor in Level 4 Lounge, come join us. But my 3 best friends and I, we watched My Kitchen Rules like there was no tomorrow. And so back in 2018, we would all sit there and they'd be like, oh no, our oven wasn't on. And I'm like, yes, it was. The producer came and turned it off. I know they're fake. But it just doesn't stop me from watching it. It's like a car crash you can't look away from. So last year was the first year that I couldn't watch it with my best friends because they all live on the other side of the country. So what we did was after I had watched it, because we're so far behind, we would go on Facebook and we would discuss it. One of our points of discussion was these two. Josh and Austin, they were the villains of the 2019 season, the 10th anniversary, where they kept saying, it's the 10th anniversary. So these guys were awful. They pulled awful faces at other people. They said awful things about other people. They would whisper, thinking that their microphones wouldn't pick it up, so maybe not that bright. And they were just so awful. I don't know if I've said that word enough, but they were so awful. I did not like them at all. And every time when it was their time to cook and they kept stuffing up, and I was like, haha, yes, justice has been served. That's what you get for being an awful human being. But my best friend Sam, she thought they were pretty all right. To which I responded, maybe you should get that checked out. She defended them by saying that, yeah, they were terrible at first. They were pretty awful at first, but they turned out pretty good. Now, I was looking forward to them failing because I felt a sense of justice to it. I felt like that they got what they deserved. They kept talking up their game, they kept bringing others down, and when they were sort of down on their level, I was like, that's how it's done, people. But my friend Sam had faith in them and looked for the best. 1 Corinthians 13:6 says, love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. As Christians, we must love everyone, and that can be so hard, but it's not impossible. Often it is difficult because we close ourselves off to the possibility, writing the person up because they have wronged you before or annoyed you in the past. You've given them loads and loads and loads of chances, and yet they keep blowing each and every chance you give them, and so you've just decided to expect the worst in them because then you won't be disappointed and you won't be hurt, but also part of you feels like a sense of justice, like, yes, I was right. It serves you right. There's a huge example of this in the Bible. It was actually made into one of my favorite movies, critically acclaimed. VeggieTales, Jonah. Yeah, heard of it? It's a good movie. I highly recommend it. If it's in the library, you should go pick it up. So the story of Jonah. Turns out the VeggieTales version of Jonah is a lot more theologically accurate than I actually ever gave it credit for. Because in order to make Jonah a bit more child-friendly when illustrating the evils of Nineveh, they had the vegetables of Nineveh fish slap each other. That was how they illustrated the violence. And I just thought that was weird. I was like, that's typical VeggieTales. Turns out, Nineveh worshipped fish. That was their god. Whenever Nineveh went to battle with another city, empire, anything, if they won, they would then take all of that city's gods and all of their artifacts and bring them back to Nineveh and worship them themselves. It's really interesting. So God tells Jonah, I want you to go to Nineveh and tell them that they're awful people and that they need to change. Now, here's another interesting fact. Nineveh and Israel were at a massive war with each other. They hated each other. They were constantly at war. It was this sort of stalemate where no one was winning, no one was losing. They were just constantly at each other's throat. So for God to say, I need you to go to your culture's greatest enemy and tell them that I'm going to destroy them if they don't change their ways, Jonah was like, you know what? This could play in my favor. I could not tell them, and they destroyed, and we win. No blood is shed from our side. So what he did was he went on a boat and he went off to Tarshish. Now, some say it's so he hid from God, which, yeah, kind of true. The Bible actually says he fled from God. And he went in the most opposite direction he could possibly think of. And there's a couple of reasons for this. The first one being that he figured, maybe he could hide from God. But the second one is that he figured he'd go as far as possible. God will eventually catch on and say, back to Nineveh. And then Jonah would drag his feet going as slowly as possible in the hopes that Nineveh will be destroyed while he was on his way. And then he'd be like, whoops. Sorry, God. So this massive storm comes along and Jonah's like, it's my bad, guys. I caused this. And so they throw him over. He actually begs them to throw him overboard. Now, Jonah didn't know God was going to send a fish. Jonah didn't know God was going to save him. So he would rather kill himself than go and tell Nineveh about what was going to happen. He would rather that nobody says anything and just let, God do what he needs to do. So God's like, nah, you're not getting it out that easily. So he sends a big fish, and the fish swallows him. And the fish is on his way to Nineveh, and it takes 3 days. And while this is happening, Jonah prays for forgiveness, and God's like, are you going to go tell Nineveh? And Jonah's like, fine, I'll go and tell Nineveh. And so God's like, just to make sure, I'm just going to drop you off at Nineveh in this fish. And so I always pictured that it's this like lone beach, this deserted beach, and the fish spews up Jonah, and he trottles on off, yelling out God's going to destroy them. That's how I always pictured it. It's not exactly what happened. Remember, Nineveh is worshipping fish at this time, okay? The fish is their god. And so the fish spews him up in the busiest area of Nineveh, which is like the pier. It's where all the markets are. It's where all the jobs are. It's kind of like being dropped in the middle of the CBD during peak hour. Like everybody can see you. So all these people who are worshipping this fish, who have no idea what's going on, see this giant fish come up to the shore, which would be weird for them, but then they see this man come out of the fish's mouth. He smells terrible. He's a bit bleached from the stomach acids, and he stands up and he opens his mouth and probably sneezes and starts walking. He doesn't say a word. Now, to reach from one end of Nineveh to the other, it takes 3 days. And so Jonah was like, God told me to come give them a message. I'll give them a message. So within half a day, he opens his mouth and he says 5 words. That's it. He says 5 words in Hebrew. In English, it's a bit more than 5. In English, it's the equivalent of saying, let me just find it, 40 more days and Nineveh will be overturned. That's it. That's all he said. And then he walked off out of the town. Now, at first I thought it was in fear, but Jonah didn't run back to Israel. Jonah just sat outside the city at what he determined was a safe distance from all the carnage he believed was going to happen. But because God put in these circumstances of a fish is what swallows him, a fish is what throws him up, they kind of thought this guy was pretty specky. This guy was pretty special. And so what he had to say mattered. And so Jonah's sitting there and he's waiting. And he's waiting and he's waiting and he's waiting and he's waiting for this town to just go utterly destroyed. And it never happens. So instead of Jonah just going, well, guess I did my job. You know, it's kind of like when your mum tells you to go and tell your siblings that dinner is ready, and you just sit at the table and you go, dinner is ready. Oh, I said it. Or like you yell up the stairs and your mum's like, I could have done that. So he did the absolute bare minimum, thinking that he would get the results he wanted, but he did what God told him to do, and he's waiting for this city to just get decimated. He's delighting in the joy that his enemies, the people that he's not a huge fan of, are just going to get decimated. But they change. The king hears about the man who got eaten, like spewed up by a fish. He did get eaten, but whatever. Got spewed up by a fish, who's come to deliver this message, and the king's like, we need to take this seriously. We've all got to change. We've clearly been doing life wrong. And so they change. And God says, I don't need to destroy them. They did what I wanted them to do. And instead of Jonah going, yeah, team God, high five, he chucks a massive tantrum. And that's where the book leaves us. He was delighting in the prospect of that punishment for these people, not keeping into account that people change. I got this wrong in the first one. I said I was one of 3 siblings. I'm one of 4 siblings. Sometimes I like to forget about one, but... and growing up, there was a lot of, how do I put this politely? There's a lot of tiffs, a lot of arguments. Sometimes we clashed. By sometimes, I mean a lot more than sometimes. And when one of us got in trouble, the other one who was fighting with us, whatever, would delight in it, and we'd have like this massive smirk on our face, like, haha, you got in trouble and I didn't. If we were especially evil that day, you know, one of them would get sent to our room, and our rooms were pretty close together, so we would stand in the doorway and just try and smirk as big as we could at them, like, you got in trouble and I didn't. Nowadays, like, if I get sent to my room, I'm like, yes. I have a laptop in my room and Netflix and everything. I love you, Nana. I live with my grandmother. But that's the thing, like when growing up with my siblings, it was just always delighting in the fact that when they got in trouble and I was just like, yes, got what you deserved. I didn't. Sometimes I got away with a lot more than I probably should have. We all did. But then we go into 1 Corinthians 13, verse 7, and it says, it bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, and endures all things. This one's from the ESV. In the NIV, it has the word always instead of all things. Always bears, always believes, always hopes, always endures. Now, part of the reason it took 7 years to do my degree was because I just loved Greek so much, and I just wanted to keep doing the subject, so I did it 4 times. And so I spent a lot of money on learning a dead language. I can't say, where's the train station, but I can say the man exorcised the demons out of the other man, important stuff. So I'm going to teach you some Greek today. So the first word we have is the word stego. Say stego with me. Oh, much louder than this morning. Well, granted, there's more of you, so it makes sense. Stego means to move, means to cover. I thought it said move over. Cover closely, specifically to keep water out and generally bear up under. Have you ever been to the beach, which I'm assuming most of you have, and you built a sandcastle and you try and keep the water out and the water just keeps coming in? So this is the opposite of that. It's like a flood wall. And it's so hard to keep water out. And so it's not a word that we should take lightly, I guess. It occurs 4 times, and it's only said by Paul. And it's found also in 1 Corinthians 9:12, where it says support. If others have this right of support from you, shouldn't we have it all the more? And in 1 Thessalonians 3:1, where it says stand. So when we could stand it no longer, we thought it best to be left by ourselves in Athens. The next one is the word pisto. Can we say pisto? Oh, all the teens are like, what? Pisto means faith. So if you ever want to name your child Faith in another language, I do not recommend Greek, for obvious reasons. It means to believe, entrust, or have faith. It is the same word we use to describe the faith that people have in God and the faith that people have in Jesus. It is the same faith that healed people that are from Jesus. And so it's a pretty powerful kind of faith. It's the confidence in the goodness of humanity. Next one is elpizai. Can we say elpizai? The same enthusiasm that I always said it in Greek. It means to expect or to hope, to expect the best in people and not let their history govern your opinion of them, to be open to the possibility of someone changing. I loved reading when I was a kid, and one of those series that I loved reading was a series of unfortunate events, and the author Lemony Snicket said, first impressions are often entirely wrong. When I had to go for my interviews for the union and for the presidents in both semesters of my final year, all my friends were like, just be yourself, be yourself. And I was like, how long did it take you to like me? And they were like, a week. I was like, I have 2 hours. And they're like, well, you've got to work fast. That's probably why I told the South Australian president that my friend Michaela and I were like shampoo and conditioner. It's also probably why I didn't get employed by South Australia. And the final one is the word, I always struggle with this one, upemon. You know what? You don't need to say this one. It's that one. Upomeno. Uponomo. There we go. If you want to say upomeno. Some of these words are like, can I have another vowel in there or consonant, something? And it means to stay behind, to wait, to preserve, endure, literally remain under the load. I don't know if you've ever carried something heavy and you just want to drop it, but you know you can't drop it. I worked at Subway straight after high school, and we were baking cookies, and my friend was putting the next lot of cookies in, and I was taking them out, and I was putting them in the cooling rack, and the pan hit the side, and the oven mitt goes up to here, and it rolled down and sat right here. Now, a normal person who has a thing of self-preservation would drop the pan, but I was like, trying to keep it on there because I didn't want to drop the cookies. Those were macadamia white chocolate chip, people. They are delicious. I ended up getting sent home because I had a massive blister just right here, and there's still a faint scar. But did not want to drop those cookies no matter how much it burned me. It is also like an endurance, not a sprint. Have you ever pushed yourself so much? I like to push myself, not in the whole one more push-up, one more sit-up, but more like one more forkful of pasta kind of thing. I can do this, I can do this. Watching people run makes me tired. That's my fitness level. Just a little bit further, holding on even when it seems to just be so much easier to let it go, to not give up so easily. Now, the word that does come before all these words in the NIV is the word always. And the word always is such an amazing word because it doesn't have a beginning and it doesn't have an end. It's just always there. And for some of us, the word always can be quite difficult. For instance, right now, it feels like we're always going to be in this phase 4 restrictions, doesn't it? When I was over East, I just felt like, you know what, maybe I'm meant to move back over here with all my stuff that I shipped over back to Western Australia 2 hours before I cancelled my flight. And then I was just like, oh, that was a terrible idea. So just left with a suitcase full of clothes for 2 months was super fun for everybody. It always just feels like it. There's no light at the end of the tunnel. But in this case, it's always is so much more powerful and it's so much more better than we can imagine. It's something that we've got to constantly do. And for a lot of us, it just seems so hard. It seems so hard for me to always be like that. This love never expires. And even after we're gone, the legacy still lives on. A man by the name of Peter that we find in the Bible was one of Jesus' disciples, and he was impulsive and spontaneous and often acted without thinking. And when he was with Jesus, it was not really ever a good thing. He walked on water thinking that he could do it himself. He told people to leave Jesus alone. He fell asleep when praying with Jesus. He cut off a man's ear, and then he denied Jesus 3 times, even swearing and cursing to those who pointed out his affiliation. And then we have his disciple Judas, who had this huge addiction to money that he sold out his teacher and essentially caused the crucifixion of Jesus to happen at that time. And Jesus knew this. Jesus knew what Peter was like. Jesus knew what Judas was like. And yet, when it came to his final fellowship with his disciples, he washed their feet. He humbled himself and he washed their feet. He gave Peter the seat at the table where the servant normally sits. And for anybody else, that would be like a huge insult, sort of like a just desserts thing. But for Jesus to do that, it was kind of like saying, this is what you're going to carry on my legacy. It was such a huge honor. And then for Judas, he gave Judas the place of honor, where the guest of honor, the most important person sits. He sat Judas there, not John, not any of his other disciples, but Judas, even though he knew what he was going to do. I always picture that if the 12 disciples and Jesus were in modern times and they took like a corporate photo of them, and you have Jesus in the middle and the 12 disciples around, that they would all be whispering to each other and be like, Judas should be at the back of the photo. Peter should probably join him too. And we're going to have all the tall people in front of them so they can't see him. So he's like in the photo, but he's not in the photo. You know, we can all just forget about that because they have a horrible history with it. It would be so easy to write someone off, and in some ways we feel a sense of justice when they failed, that they deserve it. I will never give them another chance because what they have done. I have given them so many chances and they've ruined each one. They are going to have to work to change my opinion of them. They have a past, and I have not forgotten it. It's ironic that we end up feeling this way, and sometimes they haven't even done it to you. Anything to you. You don't even know them. We don't like people on reality TV shows, and yet we've never met them. Now, I know that reality TV shows are super fake, and they're scripted, and they're heavily produced. I know that because I watched a documentary on it. And they have this thing called Frankenbites. Now, Frankenbites is where the editor will take a phrase that someone said over here and a phrase that they've said over here, and they'll combine them so it sounds more dramatic. So, for instance, someone over here could be saying, this soup is so slimy and gross, and then they mention somebody's name over here, like let's say Angela or something, and they go, Angela is slimy and gross. And everyone's like, but she was talking about the soup, not Angela. It's to create more drama. It's to create that villain, because every single reality TV show, Married at First Sight, The Block, MKR, all of them, they have a villain. Somebody you're supposed to be gunning to fail. Somebody you're supposed to hate. And so you see these Frankenbites in reality TV show often, but you don't realize it. If their back is to the camera and they say something terrible, it's probably a Frankenbite. If there's a voiceover, it's probably a Frankenbite. If it's like in The Bachelor currently, they're really editing terribly with that there's no space between what they're saying. They've just like cut the rest out. It's probably a Frankenbite. And it's the same in the real world as well, because we have people shaping our opinion of other people. We have producers shaping our opinion of people on reality TV shows. We have the news shaping our opinions of people in race. We have people in our families shaping our opinion of other races. And it's so sad, and we've got to remember the love that Jesus has for us. Everybody is an individual. We often, we even don't like drivers on the road. Yeah, I get that. I'm like, Ford drivers. Ugh, can't drive. Oh, we get the Perth drivers. I get offended by that. We often don't give people another chance because they've blown it over and over again. We're like, this is what you've done. I've never forgotten, so I'm just going to expect a little bit less from you. A little bit less. But I have one question for you. If you forget everything I've said, I just want you to remember this. What if God has that same attitude? What if God was like, you've just done it too many times. You can't do it anymore. I'm going to give you a timeout for 3 days. I'm going to make a fish come and swallow you for 3 days and see if that works this time. What if God had that same attitude? He wouldn't be God. He wouldn't be the God that we worship. He wouldn't be the God that we sing about. He wouldn't be the God that left the 99 to find that one. He wouldn't be the God that climbs mountains and scours the earth just to find you. People change, and people change people as well. And I think that's our huge responsibility as Christians, is to change people for God. Jesus knew this. Jesus knew that people make mistakes and he forgives. Peter denied Jesus 3 times, and Jesus asked Peter 3 times if he loved him when he came back to give the Great Commission. That wasn't to undo what Peter had done. It was to get rid of Peter's guilt. Jesus knew that the only way Peter would stop feeling guilty is if he felt that he did something. It's hard to always love, but isn't it amazing when we are loved always? The world writes people off because of their race. They decide that they're not worth their time based on their sexual orientation, that they shouldn't be included based on their past. And as Christians, we need to fight that. People stuff up. They will drive you nuts and they will disappoint you, but we are part of God's church. And it is our job to reflect the character of God from Jesus, from the one that Jesus left us with. Therefore, we must show this kind of love, the one that doesn't let negativity in, that looks for the best in everyone, that expects the best in people instead of the worst, and the one that remains and stands by him even when times get hard. So may you always love. May you always give hope to other people. May you always be hopeful in each other. May you always expect the best and never expect the worst. And may you reflect the love of God's character always. Amen.
Is it on? I really like that word, always. The fact that there's no beginning, no end, that it's always just there for us. And the song that we're going to sing really talks about how God's love is so good and it's amazing. And you can never find anything like it. It's just so amazing.
I was running wild, fell in love with the chase. I've been up and down and all over the place, wasting all my days and nights, never feeling satisfied. Putting on a smile, I was keeping it fake, but there's no imitating what I found in your grace. All the things I left behind are shadows, now I've seen the light. In my head and my soul, my heart, my all, I know that I know, never have I ever found a love so good, and never am I ever getting over living with you, and nothing will change it. All I can say is never have I ever found a love so good, so good. I've got a million reasons why I can't be the same. You've got me looking forward, never turning my gaze. Forever, God, it's you and I, together till the end of time. In my head and my soul, my heart, my all, I know that I know, never have I ever found a love so good, and never am I ever getting over living with you, and nothing will change it. All I can say is never am I ever found a love so good, so good. Your love is patient, love is kind. Your love is never hard to find. Forever I am yours and you're mine. Alright, alright, oh. Never, never have I ever found a love so good, so good. And never, never am I ever getting over living with you. And nothing will change it. All I can say is never, never have I ever found a love so good, so good. And nothing will change it. All I can say is never, never have I ever found a love so good, so good.
If you'd all like to bow your heads with me as I pray. Hey God, thank you so much for the example that you have set for us, the love you have shown your people, that you have this reckless love that we stuff up over and over again, and instead of writing us off, you give us so many chances. And Lord, may we take that attitude that you have towards us and may we show it to others. May we think before we write people off. And may we always be open to the possibility of change. In your name I pray. Amen.